Good morning, distinguished friends, ladies and gentlemen. Once again, a very warm welcome to all of you as we continue our campaign on Constitution Day and Citizens' Duties. Today, we'll be hearing from Mr. Sobi T, who is a distinguished member of the Indian community in Azerbaijan. Mr. Sobi T has held many leadership positions in the Indian community in the past, including being the president of the Indian Association of Azerbaijan. Friends, today's topic is of particular relevance as we continue to battle this coronavirus pandemic. Therefore, there is a need as a society for us to develop a stronger sense of scientific temper to find solutions to fight this pandemic, and also to be more humane in taking care of those who are affected by it. Once again, friends, thank you very much for joining us. I hope you'll have a very fruitful morning. Namaste, Jai Hind.
Friends, good morning to you all. Hope and wish everybody is safe and healthy during these pandemic times. At the onset, I am thankful to the invitation and opportunity extended to me by the esteemed Embassy of India in Azerbaijan to give a talk on one of citizens' fundamental duties, Article 51A(h), as part of Embassy's year-long events commemorating the 70th anniversary of Constitution Day and campaign on citizens' fundamental duties. My sincere thanks to the Honorable Ambassador of India, Sri Vanlal Vavna, for this opportunity. Now, let's get straight to our topic. Fundamental duties of citizens were added to the Indian Constitution based on the recommendations of Swaran Singh Committee, which came into effect on 3rd January 1977. The Constitution of India identifies 11 fundamental duties which it expects its citizens to follow. Now, my topic on citizens' duties today is Article 51A(h), which states that it shall be the duty of every citizen of India to develop scientific temper, humanism, spirit of inquiry and reform. Now, in 1977, India became the first country, or perhaps the only country, to include in its constitution scientific temper with humanism as a fundamental duty of all citizens of the country. Now, let's see what was the context that prevailed in our country that made it necessary to include scientific temper as citizens' duties. During the period of our independence and years immediately after and decades that followed, 70% of our population were in dire poverty, and almost the same percentage of people, especially women, were functionally illiterate. Discrimination based on religion, caste, creed, gender, and ethnic identities prevailed on the basis of irrational beliefs, and superstitions were widely prevalent, which was a blot on our society. While science is universal and unifying, religion and their dogmas are divisive. Hence, advocating for scientific temper meant a secular policy by the state and its people towards religion and a fight against bigotry so prevalent among the Indian masses. Hence, developing scientific temper was an antidote to the traditional religious and superstitious dogmas that prevailed in our country. Now, let's get to the origin, the concept of scientific temper. Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru coined the term scientific temper, the reference to which can be found in his book Discovery of India. By cultivating scientific temper, he meant people should be able to think independently, understand and practice scientific methods in their daily lives, analyze and take informed and calculated decisions based on evidence, reason and logic, and not having blind beliefs, being superstitious and submitting your destiny to unscientific powers. Scientific temper is humanity's assertion of being in charge of its destiny and not being a passive victim to unscientific forces. Now, let's come to the fundamentals of scientific temper. The spirit of inquiry and the acceptance of the right to question and be questioned are fundamental in scientific temper. It considers knowledge as open-ended and ever-evolving. Scientific temper is incompatible with religious and theological beliefs. Social justice, widespread education, and unrestricted communication are prerequisites for the spread of scientific temper. Now, let's see what are the methods of science. The method of science consists of 6 steps: define purpose, construct hypothesis, test the hypothesis and collect data, analyze data, draw conclusions and communicate results. Now in simple words, in the method of science, we make observations and experiments and use evidence, logic and rational thinking to make decisions. More importantly, we are allowed to question and re-question everything. There is no final authority and no final answer. Science is thus a work in progress. Answers are tentative and can be called into question at any time by anybody. This is the method of science, inquiry and reform. The spirit of reform is bound to the very root ideas of scientific development and research. Scientific development cannot take place without reform. By reform, it means to redevelop, reimagine, and to look for novel ideas. But is this what we are projecting as science? We do not teach the scientific method in our schools. Instead, we burden our children with facts after facts. We burden their bags with bags full of books containing facts. But do we tell them how did we come to know all these facts? The process of science, inquiry and reform is far more important than the end result or a product, because the product may be of interest to only a small group of people, but the process of inquiry and reform should be able to reach to a much wider population. Everyone is born with a scientific temper. The child wants to touch, feel, experiment and explore everything on its own. To question why, how, when, what, the basic ingredients of scientific temper. However, somewhere down the line, owing to social conditioning or traditional influences, or due to the type of education being imparted in our schools, the child loses the tendency to ask questions and explore natural phenomena, leading to the acceptance of notions forced upon it without putting into scientific practice. Therefore, scientific method of inquiry needs to be incorporated into our school curriculum at all stages so that the spirit of scientific inquiry can be inculcated from a very young age. Now, how do we remove blind faith and superstition from our society? Social justice, widespread education, and unrestricted communication are prerequisites for the spread of scientific temper. If we want everyone to make evidence-based decisions, we must make it possible for everyone to have access and to be able to understand the evidence. And that is why we must teach science as a set of methods and not merely as a body of facts that some scientists have discovered by some kind of magic. Only then we can create scientific temper in the society and remove blind faith and superstition. Now, science education should empower a school child who is told that an idol has begun to drink milk, or that diseases can be cured by attending miracle crusades. She or he needs to apply the scientific method, observation, experiment, logic, rational thinking, and to develop a questioning and disbelieving attitude to decide whether what he or she has been told is logical. Now, are we to use scientific methods for everything? The answer is clearly no. I do not use scientific method to decide what kind of music I want to listen, or if I need to go to a restaurant, or on the color of shirt I want to wear. So this brings us to the question of when we should use scientific method and when we need not. If we want to know whether smoking cigarette, using tobacco increase the risk of cancer, we need to adopt to scientific methods. Now, if somebody tells you that drinking a little bit of red wine every day reduces the risk of heart diseases, here in this case we need to use scientific temper. If we want to decide to learn how to put a spacecraft on moon, then we need to use scientific method. If we have to conclude whether or not Indians practiced interplanetary travel or performed plastic surgery thousands of years ago, then we have to resort to scientific practices. It is perfectly alright for me to say that I like Carnatic music over Hindustani music without scientifically justifying it. However, it is not alright for me to say that genetically modified GM crops is bad for us, or rather it is good for us. In this case, we need to use scientific methods. All of us should use scientific method where it is needed, whether we are the so-called scientists or the so-called non-scientists. Now that leads us to the question, does it mean being educated mean one has scientific temper? Education and literacy may not have much to do whether you have scientific temper in you or not. Even at this technological age, why are blind faith and superstition so prevalent? One would argue that both scientists and non-scientists are to blame. Let me give you two examples. Chairman of the Indian Space Research Organization, ISRO, is regarded as one of the country's most eminent scientists. When a scientist of such eminence, a day prior to the launch, places the replica of the Mars orbiter, Mangalyaan, at the feet of a deity and prays to a particular god, which principle of science is he applying? The complexity and audacity of the task of landing a spacecraft on a moving target Mars, 54.6 million kilometers away, is purely based on science. The timing of a satellite launch or a missile test is obviously set based on scientific factors. No Panchanga, almanac or astrology is ever involved. Even if you are a scientist, scaling the heights of science, seeking divine blessings or visiting a religious place to practice one's faith is a purely personal business, which is also a constitutional right of every Indian citizen. One is allowed that liberty, but to take the replica of Mars orbiter and to place it at the feet of a deity is hardly a personal business, and it doesn't help to instill scientific temper in the impressionable minds of our children. Now then we have a non-scientist chanting in public and media glare, joined by a chorus, "Corona go, go Corona." Now Corona would have been baffled and left wondering, are these guys driving me out, or are they cheering me up, motivating me? Go, go Corona, Corona go. In a lighter vein, I would say, the moment you are exposed to this utterance, it plays in infinite loops in your mind. Corona go, go Corona. We Indians are largely spiritual beings. Spirituality lies in our ethos. However, can spiritual and scientific thoughts not contradict, but can complement each other? The Dalai Lama is questioning all the beliefs and practices of Buddhism, an ancient Indian philosophical and spiritual tradition, and finding scientific reasons for the spiritual beliefs and practices. His Holiness, the Dalai Lama, has been closely working with prominent Western psychologists, neuroscientists, quantum mechanics, and meditation teachers, and shedding new light on compassion as medicine, the nature of consciousness, self-esteem, and the meeting point of the mind, body, and the spirit for the past 25 years. Now, let me briefly tell you about what is humanism. Humanism is a progressive philosophy of life which has even its roots in our Rig Veda. Now, humanism is without any theism or in any other supernatural beliefs. Humanism affirms our ability and responsibility to lead ethical lives of personal fulfillment that aspire to the greater good. Humanism derives the goals of life from human need and interest rather than from any religion and asserts that humanity must take responsibility for its own destiny. Humanism shows humanity towards each other of intermingling and interdependence. Science is there to serve humanity and its everlasting progress around the world without boundaries. Vasudhaiva Kudumbakam, world and humanity is one family. Now, to conclude, scientific temper is a way of life we all need to have in our personality. If we develop scientific temper and develop it in our personalities, we are opening up a completely new avenue to exhibit patriotism to our country. The Constitution of India identifies 11 fundamental duties which it expects all citizens to follow, and this is that important part of our duty. If we follow our Constitution, we are being more patriotic. Almost 100 years ago, in 1925, Mahatma Gandhi wrote in Young India, "The true source of right is duty." If we all discharge our duties, rights will not be far to seek. Nowadays, patriotism is the buzzword. When did you and me last exhibit patriotism? For most of us, it could be that we stopped munching the popcorn and stood up for the national anthem. For some, it would be liking, sharing, commenting on Facebook posts, WhatsApp, forwarding WhatsApp. If we discharge our fundamental duties, develop scientific temper, it would be patriotism of a much higher order. A week after the Pokhran nuclear tests in May 1998, India's former Prime Minister Sri Atal Bihari Vajpayee improvised on the popular slogan, "Jai Jawan, Jai Kisan, Jai Vigyan." Hail the soldier, hail the farmer, hail science. Friends, thank you all for your kind and patient listening. Once again, Excellency, thank you for your kind consideration and invitation. I would like to conclude with a poem by Nobel laureate, our beloved Rabindranath Tagore, where the mind is without fear. Where the mind is without fear and the head is held high, where knowledge is free, where the world has not been broken up into fragments by narrow domestic walls, where words come from the depth of truth, where tireless striving stretches its arms towards perfection, where the clear stream of reason has not lost its way into the dreary desert sand of dead habit, where the mind is led forward by thee into ever-widening thought and action, into that heaven of freedom, my Father, let my country awake. Jai Hind.